The Versus series is so beloved and one of the best crossover games that ever came out. At the time, this was unheard of. Two giant companies coming together to fight each other in a video game. You had X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and of course, Marvel vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom 2. All were amazing arcade games and gave us tons of fun and enjoyment. Now the thing is, these were arcade games, meaning to get the full experience you had to go to the arcades as these games required powerful hardware to run them at full capacity. These games being so popular, of course, Capcom had no choice but to port these titles to the consoles. Now, the Sega Saturn versions of these games fared much better and were terrific arcade perfect ports, thanks to the RAM expansion pack you could use with them. In this case, we are talking about X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Unfortunately, Marvel vs. Capcom did not come to the Sega Saturn, but it did get ported perfectly to that other beautiful Sega machine. The machine I'm talking about is the Sega Dreamcast, and like I said, what a port it was. As mentioned earlier, this game was arcade perfect on the Dreamcast and was absolutely beautiful and fun. Now, this incredible game did get another port, and that was to the inferior Sony Playstation, which was old at this point, so no surprise it was inferior. Now, I'm not going to go into detail, as I'm sure most of you already know, but the Sony Playstation was not a 2D machine and struggled to run these games. X-Men vs. Street Fighter was pretty bad on PlayStation, and they definitely improved with Marvel vs. Street Fighter. So when this crazy Marvel vs. Capcom game came to PlayStation, we really didn't know what to expect and kind of expected the worst. But what we got was a pretty damn good game. Now, yes, I know Marvel vs. Capcom on the PlayStation is not perfect. It has many flaws, from cut frames and animations to dull sound and music and slow gameplay to tons of slowdown, especially when compared to its arcade brother. And of course, the big one, no tag team. The most important feature of the Versus games, period. But still, even without all that, this was a really fun game for what it was worth. I mean, Capcom really dug deep and provided an enjoyable experience to be played at home. Now, what I really loved is that instead of trying to somehow make this game go one for one in comparison with the arcades, Capcom said, nah, we're going to take what we have, which is the core existing game, and we're instead going to make something new of it. Essentially, turn it into its own different game and embrace the limitations of the Sony PlayStation. No tag feature? Cool. Instead, we'll let you team up with any of the playable special assist characters. Not only can you call them into battle like normal, but now you can even summon them for the variable cross mode, and they can be on screen fighting with you. Another cool feature was every time you grabbed your opponent, the screen would zoom in real quick. Or even when you did an air combo, it would zoom in on it. Again, nothing amazing, but still a nice little touch to make it a little different from the arcade version. Don't want to sit and wait through loading screens or see victory quotes and want to hurry into battle? Then there was a quick select feature where after a fight you could quickly load into another fight and skip all that presentation nonsense. Even though the presentation nonsense was pretty, but still, it was a cool feature. And now that we're on loading screens, guess what? We got a bunch of cool new loading screens. Each character got their own loading screen, and they also gave them a little personality. Cool things to look at. Now, we mentioned earlier no tag team in this game. Well, I lied. There is a tag team in this game. Well, sort of. You see, obviously because the PlayStation didn't have enough RAM, they couldn't replicate this cool feature. So, what they did is create a mode called Crossover. In this mode, The tag team feature would return, but only if you and your opponent had the exact same characters. So, if I picked Ryu and Chun-Li, then you would have to be Chun-Li and Ryu. So we'd have the same two characters but in different order, and boom, the tag option would magically return. Now, this isn't ideal since you want to be able to pick whoever you want regardless of what your opponent is doing, but it was still a cool, decent addition nonetheless. The game also features an ending collection, a gallery collection, and even a demo to showcase the special characters so you can see them in their glory, sort of like a model viewer. Only you couldn't rotate them or anything, but you could select them and see them in all of their glory. There's just a charm about this game that I can't really describe. Yeah, it's severely lacking compared to the arcade and Dreamcast versions, but it still stands on its own. You still get versus gameplay action for the most part, and you still get your favorite characters. You just now get them at a budget value, with interesting cool tweaks. X-Men vs. Street Fighter felt like Capcom was essentially giving up. Like they threw their hands in the air and said, well, this is all we can do. We're trying to mimic the arcade version and it sucks, man. That PlayStation is just too weak. So you guys are gonna get suck. Well, this time it felt like Capcom said, okay, what are the limitations of the system? What can it do and what it cannot do? Now let's work around that and create something acceptable. And I would say this game is more than acceptable. Now, don't get me wrong. If you want to enjoy the versus games like Marvel vs. Capcom, how it was intended to be, then you're going to want to play the arcade or Dreamcast version. Nothing compares to the fast-paced fighting this game from its original form, especially considering the PlayStation version can go for quite a hefty price these days. I have both the Dreamcast and PlayStation version, and I gotta say, I enjoy them both. The Dreamcast one goes without saying, but the PlayStation one really surprised me. It really gave me tons of joy, and it was quite different. Again, I just enjoyed it. Trust me, you'll have fun with this game and you'll enjoy it as well. And at the very least, it's a nice piece to add to the collection. Take care, guys.